We're on.
Oh, we are.
This is on. This is literally me filming.
We're rolling.
We're rolling. So let's begin with this. Like right at the top of the hill. We're less than a mile from the house.
Yeah.
What we're seeing right here, this is, let's see if I can get it in, where does it say? Thunder on the Hill. Can you even see the sign?
They took the sign down.
They took the sign down. This is the NASCAR track, which is near our house.
Yep.
But
it's really literally right down the road. Like we could walk here.
We could walk here. And what's interesting is this may not be our home for very long.
Right. You want me to say anything more about that?
Well, I guess we can go with that.
We pulled cards for the full moon last night. And the I Ching card was Wanderer, and the Enchanted Traveler card was Coming Alive. And we've just come back from wandering. Well, not really. This is an interesting topic. Like, what is wandering? Like, the true essence of wandering. Not just like, oh, you're like wandering around, but like a true wanderer. A true wan.
Oh, a true a true wanderer. I mean, this goes back to my thought of. I mean, it's been a while since I've talked about like the idea of like nomad, not mad, the nomadic way of being human and so forth. But a wanderer. I mean, that's basically another word I would say for an independent nomad. Like a wanderer refers a solitary nomad.
Yeah.
And so to your point, so we pick cards for the full moon, the moon that began with the ceremony in Juniper Springs.
Right. Yes. And we were this is the car that we were driving around down in Florida, wandering with a mission.
Wandering with a mission.
Oh my gosh, there's the W and the M. MW.
Wandering with a mission.
Michael
okay.
Wan, wandering with a mission.
Michael Wan, wandering with a mission. So, okay, we pull the cards.
We pull the cards, and sometimes we pull cards and they feel like they're kind of a foreshadow of what's to come. And I feel like sometimes we pull cards and it's more like a bleed through from what the energy we're carrying.
Okay.
And I guess I'll share when we came home. You know that feeling when you come home and you like walk into your house and you're like, oh, like it feels so good to like the familiarity and the right
to be home.
It's a common thing.
Right, it's like you're home. It's like I've been away from home and I've returned to where I feel comfortable, which is my home, and I'm so glad to be there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we both didn't feel that.
No, what did we feel?
Oh, it felt very oppressive.
It felt oppressive.
Yeah. It didn't feel nurturing and comforting. It felt like gloomy.
All right.
And so I don't know what that's about, but I lived on a bus for 2 years, you know that, full-time bus. And every time I came home from traveling, I always felt like, oh, it feels so good to be home and like my bus. And one might think that like a bus is a difficult place to live. It would be really great to have a break, and when you come back, they'd be like, oh, back to like chopping wood and hauling water. But there's so much like given comfort at the house in Bechtelsville, and yet I don't have that like somatic, like visceral response. Bay's Rock Shop.
It's a top crystal shop.
It's a regional supplier.
A regional supplier for all your crystal needs.
Just a few blocks from our house. So anyway, so we pulled the Wanderer, and then Coming Alive, and we interpreted it as the Wanderer coming alive in us. And on top of that, the home. I mean, how would you describe?
Well, the day after, like returning home, and it not having that. That the archetypical feel of returning home is like, oh, now I'm comfortable, now I'm back where I should be.
Yeah.
And then first noticing not having that, and then picking those cards.
How does this work?
How does what work?
Oh, you're filming me while you're talking?
Yeah, just kind of filming in general. And I can't really see the lens. So we've never done this before, this filming in the car. So this conversation which we're having is not only like spontaneous in the fact that we didn't talk about what we're going to talk about, but then we've never used the technology this way before. So, okay, where were we?
Well, you somehow brought up, Thunder Hills by our home, and then you're like, but we might not be here for long.
But we might not be here for long because clue number 1, came home, didn't feel like home. Clue number 2, pick card, said you better start wandering.
Clue number 3, our rent doubled.
Our rent doubled. Our rent doubled. And you're a tough negotiator. You're like, okay, landlord, we're going to be gone.
Me? I'm a tough negotiator?
Well, I meant like you laid like the line. You were like, when talking to him.
What, the June 15th?
Yes.
So we're in a short-term lease. Well, for a variety of reasons, but we're in a short-term lease. And so the time came up for us to renegotiate the next lease. And ideally, the landlord wanted a year commitment. And given the Wanderer coming alive for us, and given this like missional astrology work starting to take off, we can't really commit to a year. Like financially, we can't be paying for something that we're not going to be utilizing. Even though we would love to have a home base and have some familiarity and have a home community, really like living in Bechtelsville and Boyertown, we're really having to start from scratch because we're both transplants back here to my hometown area. And so we're not quite getting what we want here as a long-term strategy, but we did get to touch, and we are touching like ancestral lineage and roots here. We were just at the Historical Society yesterday pulling up 1800s maps and deeds and all that kind of stuff, just trying to understand the energy that's really the terrestrial energy that we've really been marinating in for the last 4 months. But we're very open, as the Tao Te Ching would guide us to be, to the ebbing and flowing of like the universal life force flowing through us. And that might mean that we've had the touch we needed of terrestrial ancestral energy, and now we need to continue wandering, being the magi and priestess of the stars, bringing the board to the people. We joke about that, but there is the element of ceremony, the ritual drama that we bring. It is a part of the magic, I think.
I would say it's a big part. But without, I'm gonna resist the temptation to go down that rabbit path and bring it back to this wanderer and this movement and this. I mean, again, this is an ancient way in which one lived life. Right?
Yes, yeah.
And both you and I would say more me than you, but are products of this culture which we're born into. And so to go back to an ancient way ain't farming. Like, that's new. Like, the ancient way is a wanderer, like maybe wandering people. Nomadic. And in some ways what we're describing feels like, I mean, we could say our hand is being forced, but it really isn't. Our hand isn't being forced. We are taking its call. We're listening to its call. And so, like this is, we had a conversation with the landlord where we're like, well, maybe we're not going to go and renew this lease. And maybe we don't have a plan other than we're going to move. And we've been talking about all of these things like over these past couple weeks. And at least in my mind, in the background, there had been there's been like this platform of like, okay, we're calling home right now this place in Bechtelsville, but now maybe that's going away, and what does it look like to really lean into this way of living life of wandering, but not like but not aimlessly like a drifter.
Right.
And I know drifters.
So you were saying we're not wandering aimlessly like drifters, because both of us know drifters.
Correct.
We know that lifestyle. It's wandering with a mission.
Wandering with a mission. So and the idea I was talking about, or I brought up, is like leaning into that. Like, what does that look like? Like, that's a very new thing for me.
Right.
There's something which is, I mean, to be quite honest, if I want to go and utilize a,
there you go.
if I want to use an astrology model, like I would fit a drifter model in the fact that I have Mars and Pisces in the 9th house. Like, that's a missionary drifter, because the 9th house. So there's that, but I try not to live my life based upon those things.
Yeah.
There's a part of me experientially, which I don't like the way any of this sounds.
The way any of what sounds?
Aimless, mindless drift, or like the drifter, like if anything, like the not having a home base.
Right.
And then there's a part of me which is like the opposite of that, which is one, like, because you don't want to feel that way, like, well, then you're going to lean into it and go and see what that is. And then 2 is like, now is the time, like, looking at life. And then even 3, the last year, I mean, arguably the last 5 years of my life, but definitely the last year has slowly kind of been this deconstructing process. So that's where we are. So where do we begin this conversation? How do we begin this conversation?
So, well, we decided we decided to record in the car, because this is the car that we did our adventures in the shift in. Like, we still have some unpacking to do. I mean, actually, that's more than unpacking. That's like winter things that have to go back to storage. But, we wanted to show people the nature dash.
All right.
that we travel with, and so, like, sand dollars go up there, and just, oh gosh, don't go down there, that's so messy. But we get all kinds of looks. Like, do you notice that? Like, people, you've had this experience, people randomly come up to me in the car, or to us, and they, like, have comments about the dash. Yes. The funniest one was when a child walked by and was like, "Look, Mommy, look at all that trash." And I was just like, sure, okay, I can see how it looks a little disorganized. But, like, ultimately, it's very, like, you know, I keep, like, meticulous order of chaos
Meticulous.
on my dash.
That is an accurate description of this setup.
It's my nature table, and like altered to the living beings, it's like a museum though, because there's everything is dried out. But it's funny, there's a parallel here between like everyone has different thoughts and opinions and feelings. Like, some people, as they're driving by, they like stare at it in total confusion, while other people are like, oh my god, that's so beautiful, like, I'm so inspired. And I think we get that same extreme reaction in ourselves and from others when we talk about, like, wandering or drifting or, like, being nomadic and not holding down a home, especially because we have kids. Like, yours are older than mine, but, like, that's kind of like there's a lot to this. There's like, we're thick in it.
We're thick in it, and so I want to say, before we move off of this, you said that this is, did you call it a museum? Was that the phrase?
It's like a museum sanctuary to living things, because they're all dried up.
I would also indicate for you, though, it's also it's a timeline.
Ah, yes.
Like, all of the, like, they have these pieces, Like, I'm surprised by how my truck has things in it, not to this level, but I've always had feathers and stones, and I've collected things along the way, and I keep them in my truck, but definitely not to this extent. But I have no idea where any of it came from. I'm like, at some point I picked that up and I put it in, but I don't remember when. But all of these do have a story.
I mean, I can't tell you the story of every single piece, but yeah.
So, okay, going back to what you were saying of like of
The reactions.
well, one, the reactions, but then also the implications of like I've got a voice in my head from I'll just name him. I'll just give his first name, and you'll know who he is. Bill.
Okay.
And we used to have this conversation. He and we've had this conversation at least for 10 years. Based around the movie, and I don't know how, I don't think you know this movie because you don't know popular culture, but around Pulp Fiction.
Okay, yeah.
Have you ever seen Pulp Fiction? No. So there are two hitmen and are in it, and one of the hitmen has what he thinks is like a spiritual experience. Like, he goes to shoot someone and he misses him, and he was like, God steps in, something like that. And the movie unfolds, and they're having this conversation in a coffee shop, and he's like, I want to, the hitman who was touched by God was like, I'm going to walk away from it all, and I'm going to wander the earth just like Cain. So not like biblical Cain from the 1970s show called Kung Fu.
Okay.
And it's like so friggin' legit, like as an idea, like in the modern, I mean, this Pulp Fiction came out in 94, but I think it's still like it still speaks today to a degree. And he was like, I just want to go and be a wanderer. And then the other hitman was like, yeah, we got a name for that. We got a name for that, Jules. That name is Bum. You want to be a bum. And so I had this conversation with Bill, and he and I were both like, we were on the same page on a certain level. We were both hitmen. We weren't really hitmen, I suppose. Okay. But like I was the wanderer then, and he was the
one calling you a bum?
He was the one saying, yeah, there's a word for it. He's called a bum. And so when I say there's a voice in my head, when I hear that, Bill represents a certain sort of, it's not so much Bill as much as like that archetype, that like you can't do that. Right.
The inflexibility of consciousness, which we were talking about on my podcast yesterday.
Okay, all right.
But okay, so I think we've built a perfect setup for this is the last kind of segment of Adventures in the Shift, and the last story we have is our time in Venice. And this maybe you'll just have to trust me here, but this open question of like different perspectives, different reactions to the dashboard, just as we have different reactions to this idea of being like gypsies or of like being wandering, like mission-oriented wanderers. It comes back.
Okay.
Because I think that like in Venice we had two pretty beautiful scenarios that I think we'll be able to come back to this question with more
insight?
Yeah.
Depth? Okay.
Yeah.
Walk me through where you want to go.
Well,
do we want to go? Are we going right into? Do we have time?
Sure.
All right. So we last left off at the villages.
Right.
We leave the villages with a loaf of bread, half a loaf of bread.
Right.
And we we actually went back to Orlando Airport. We picked up friends who live in what is it even called? Camp Hill what?
Camp Hill Kimberton?
But what is Camp Hill called? Like the idea, are they communities, Camp Hill communities?
Yeah, it's like an organized community that has like a human interest mission.
And is it Steiner based or
totally?
Totally. Okay, so there's a Steiner based
biodynamic
farming,
anthroposophy
communities.
Waldorf schools.
And they're all over the world.
Yeah.
And the first one was in Scotland, and these two are
an art teacher,
and a dairy farmer, longtime friends of yours.
Yep.
And we picked them up.
Yeah.
At the Orlando airport.
Yes.
And then we drove to Venice, Florida.
Yes.
Which is on the west coast of Florida, south of Tampa, on the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes.
All right. So that's the setup.
And so, can I just drop a highlight?
Yeah, exactly.
Because we already talked about a little bit that we did a starboard ceremony with Shara and our two friends, and that was really beautiful. We've had this theme of animals showing up. Like the raccoon came the night of the starboard ceremony at Juniper Springs, and then previously we had the owl.
The raccoon. Okay, all right, I know where we're going.
And then at the end of this, like at the very last intention stone drop, like we kind of like closed the container.
Okay.
Of the sharing, and this frog out of nowhere. We're in like a canopy kind of thing, like an outdoor table and chairs that was covered because there's like a lot of no-see-ums and mosquitoes.
It's Florida.
And this tree frog jumped out of nowhere. Like, I don't even know
where
it came from.
It landed right on the starboard.
Right on Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
And it like made a space right between me and my girlfriend's like intention stones.
Okay.
And then it went from the starboard, it jumped onto my face.
Yes.
Right. And then it jumped around and it landed in the cookies. And it was on Derek for a little bit. It was on your leg for a little bit. Tree frog.
It had an interaction with everyone.
Right. And the tree frog, the medicine of the tree frog is about replenishing and understanding how sensitive we are to our environment and how that's a strength because it lets us know when we need to replenish, like kind of like a hot.
When you say replenish, what do you mean?
Like hop back in the water.
Okay.
Because it's a tree frog, right?
Okay.
It needs to. I think. Do you know anything about tree frogs?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure that they can't dry out.
I don't think so. They're like moist and like succulent.
So that was a highlight. But do you want to say anything about that? Because I know you have a big highlight.
As it relates to the tree frog?
No. As it relates to your hat and sunglasses.
Okay, well...
the alternative celebrity character.
So let's stick with the animals. So
okay.
I want to leave it maybe just as simple as the starboard and the animal kingdom is very, like it's undeniably connected. We can see that like every time that we went, at least on this trip, when we were outside, there was some interaction.
Yeah.
And for the most part, they were meaningful. Like the hawk had a very the owl had a historical and a timeliness to you or to us.
Uh-huh.
And then the tree frog did as well.
Yeah.
So it's not even just like, and the raccoon did. I've got the raccoon. I don't think quite is rich of a connection, but nonetheless that happened. And so I just wanted to point that out. Like when we're doing these starboard ceremonies, like something else is happening.
Yeah.
And it's shown in the realm of the animal kingdom, and I don't want to define it any more than that, but it's not in question to me. But then I also want to say the other thing which is interesting within the starboard ceremony is do you want
to let people know we're going through downtown Boyertown?
This is downtown Boyertown.
This is the town. Like, we live in Bechtelsville, but if you're going to go into town, this is the town that we go into and through for things.
This is it.
So we'll just leave it there.
there's this other thing which is happening with like the dropping on the board. You talked about this also in the Hostel of the Forest about like the stone that went into the center of the starboard.
Yeah.
What I flicked onto the Susquehanna mystery map, and then also I think there was one other instance. But I want to bring up the starboard ceremony that we had with our friends from Kimberton. What we did was we built a synastry chart. We built their 2 charts, and we did a specific date. It was different than what we did with Shara. And I had asked both of them to place a stone onto the table after we built their chart. And Derek is a little bit of a troublemaker, and like he didn't want to play along with me. He's like, no, I'm not going to put it. I'm going to take this little stone, and I'm just going to put it in my pocket. I'm going to put it in Emily's pocket. I'm going to put it in Emily's pocket. And I was like,
I thought it was sweet. He was setting his intention in her pocket.
It was sweet. You're absolutely right. But I wasn't having it. But I was playing with it. It was fine. So
you wanted to see what was going to happen because you knew magic was.
I'm like that's not. I'm like. Exactly, like when you're literally the master of ceremony. Mm-hmm. I'm the master of ceremony. He's like, I'm not gonna play along with you, and I'm like, this is for you. I don't want to be like the taskmaster of ceremonies, but I'm still feeling it. Like, you know, I'm like, this is a thing. This is real. This is how it's done, and you're like showing disregard. Like there's part of that voice happening with that.
Okay.
Not loudly, but that was happening here. But I let it flow, and he puts it in there, and then at the very end, I'm like, all right, now you gotta put it on the table. And he looks at me with this twinkle in his eye. He's looking at me, and Derek's a character. And we could talk about how he's, like, his character nature. He's from another era. He's like a 1940s drifter. We're calling him McCartney the whole time.
Yes.
So here I am, and I'm like, you gotta put this on my board. And he's like looking at me, he's like, I don't gotta do nothing. But he holds his, it was a shell, it wasn't a stone, and he holds it above the board, and he looks at me about 12 inches above the board, and he drops it. And I'm thinking, as he's setting up, I'm like, this is not a wise decision, because that's hard, and that's a hard board, and when it falls, it's gonna hit and shoot out. I'm like, whatever. Like at this point, I had given up. I've emotionally... So he drops it, and just like the tree frog, it goes and it hits it hits the center, and then it shoots out. And there was one stone on the board, the same stone that the tree frog moved the night before, 2 nights before. When his shell hits that, ricochets off it, and comes to land at the at the exact location when we began our starboard. You gave me and him each a stone to place for intention. And
they had intention stones. We had blessing stones.
We had blessing stones. And I'm like, there are 2 significant locations on this board based upon a variety of locations. I put mine on one of them. And then when he dropped his shell and it went through this plinko bounce around, it landed exactly at the location which I pointed out for the second one. And so I just wanted to point that out about like the playful magic of like the tossing of the stones, and like there's a magnetism to it, like it went there. And then the animals and the trees and the meaning, like there's something that is happening. And as I'm saying this, like, you know, I'm going to go back to what we were talking about a few moments ago about like this leaning into this purposeful wanderer, you know, like becoming Cain and wandering the earth, as they say, as expressed in Pulp Fiction. I feel like there's an order that we're witnessing. There's an order that we're witnessing, which is deeper than any sort of sense of like, do I want to do this or not want to do this, as much as it is like I'm stepping in to a path which has already been, a table which has already been set for us.
Yeah. That there was a wanderer, I'm making some assumptions, but I've been around the block a few times to know. There was a wanderer in the background of our dinner and our starboard couples ceremony. Remember that guy? I'm pretty sure he was
definitely a wanderer.
Drifter wanderer.
He was a drifter wanderer.
Straight up.
Like drifter wanderer, like still has an element of like romanticism to it. Like he was straight up homeless.
Yeah. You think he was homeless?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, he was really sweet, and he was like, he kept saying, "I'm so sorry to bother you," but he was really interested in like what we were eating after we were done eating.
Right.
Like he was like, "Man," he's like, "I used to be a chef. Tell me what is that? What were you eating?" Derek made us a lovely meal, and then we were singing, and he was curious about like the song, and he stayed in the background throughout that whole like starboard ceremony on the beach, like under that canopy. So that's interesting.
So in light of what we're talking about, yes, and he did not feel. So we're about to pause in this video, or you and I are going to pause. The person who's watching isn't going to experience a pause because it's going to be fluid, but our energy will change because we're going to add something. We're going to put something in between. Mm-hmm. So before that happens, I want to go and I want you to share this one last thing. After that, so that starboard ceremony, the starboard which we had with Shara, we had at the Airbnb, which the four of us were renting.
Yeah.
The ceremony which we had for Derek and Emily was held right in like the public rest area in Venice, the Venice beach. There were tables out there, but it was public and was literally right on the beach. Mm-hmm. We began right after sunset, so all these people come every night and they watch the sun go beneath the horizon. Mm-hmm. And then we were there, we did our thing, there was this drifter there, and then what happened when we're completed after the magic?
I'm not sure which story I'm supposed to tell. You mean when we walked out onto the beach?
Yeah, and what did we see?
Oh, we walked out onto the beach, and as soon as it opened up like from the mangroves, there was a perfect starboard circle like made of shells. I mean, it wasn't a starboard circle, but it was a perfect circle made of a foot thick of shells just right when we got
right out. And we walked into it.
Oh, we walked into it, and
it was overcast.
As we were walking out, it was overcast. It had been overcast for the most of the evening. And then as we walked out and we like circled around the shells, and like we found a little place that someone had like made an opening, which was clearly like an opening to like walk through. The like clouds like lightened, and Venus and the moon
came out,
popped out, and it was like us in this circle like shape,
right,
and the moon in its circle shape, and Venus in its little dot in the sky, and it was like a perfect kind of like wanderer's blessing. Like
it was a wanderer's
blessing. Right
blessing.
Place at the right time.
It like from like a different era where like the sky opened up in the circle which I came across at the right time. So then you went into the ocean. You returned something.
I returned something. I had my own ceremony.
Right.
From there.
Completely independent of all of that.
Completely independent.
But it was our time in Venice marked an end, like a completion of a certain cycle for you, correct?
Yeah.
And then both you and Derek separately did something.
Well, so Derek had really bad sunburn, and so the one evening he decided to get into the water, but he didn't want to take anything off because the sunburn was like really bad. I was a little bit afraid it was like burns, like 3rd-degree burns. But for whatever reason, I don't really know why, he slowly walked into the still, calm Gulf of Mexico ocean, right? There's not a lot of waves, especially in the evening. He walked in slowly with all of his clothes on, like a full long sleeve flannel, full jeans, and like he had swim trunks on, I think, under the jeans, and shoes and hat.
So let me just pause right now just to put in context. So we're at the beach. This was the night before, and the beach is pretty crowded because it's a normal activity to watch the sunset. And everyone's there in their like beautiful beach attire. Like I mean, like there's a beach vibe. Like that's fun about going to the beach. And Derek is a 1940s carny time transplant. And he's at the Florida beach, and he's at the beach wearing a flannel shirt. No one else is wearing a flannel shirt. And he's got long pants. No one else has any long pants on. And he's got a hat on. He's got a wool hat. Like he looks like he's literally like off the boats from Ireland. and like some people, the sun had gone down. The water was warm. Mm-hmm. It was mild out. Mm-hmm. And there were some people in the water, but it wasn't in the middle of the day. Like it was like slightly
after sundown.
It was after sundown. And he just walks right out into the ocean fully dressed.
Like really slow.
Really slow. And I'm just like watching like the whole time, like I'm watching Derek and I'm like, this is like a movie scene.
Yeah.
Like everything about this, I'm like, you're a movie character and this is a movie scene and this is happening. And so like that to me was like a lot of fun. Like I always see things through that lens of movies. And then you did the same thing more or less, right?
It was like way after sundown, and there was no one on the beach, and it was dark. So.
But you walked in dressed.
Mostly.
Mostly?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to have some dry clothes, so I was like half dressed. Ooh, sorry.
So the one thing, where I'm going with all of these things, and like I'm gonna, and I don't want to there's more I want to talk about with our Venice trip, but what I'm thinking as it relates to this wanderer idea, and now with the hindsight of time, that we came back to Bechtelsville, we felt a certain way, we had this conversation, wander, and then like that conversation was spontaneous.
Yeah.
Now going back and telling what happened in Venice Beach, like they were like our magic folks, like they came down with us, or they're the reason we even went down there.
Right, because they
were the trigger of saying like, let's plan a trip.
They've never been on a vacation. They've been on trips. Like they've traveled for like work and stuff like that, for trainings and those things. Like they're travelers.
This was their first kind of like vacation, if you will.
And they were deciding whether for their soon honeymoon to do a tropical or a European kind of thing. And I think that they were testing the waters with going that far south in Florida, and realized that they wouldn't be able to do the tropical. They wouldn't be able to handle that much sun.
What we experience with them, we like now, this is where the point I was trying to make, like the hindsight is like the wander was there. There was like that magic, there was like the circle, there was going into the water, the replenishing, right?
Oh,
the replenishing,
yes, I see.
the completion of a cycle, there was all of that. But at the time, like, we were just like dream walking, living life. But with the hindsight, like this is making much more sense to like, okay, that open and shut the door to where we are right now.
Right. And up next, celebrity.
All right, so what I want to talk about the celebrity because that's kind of funny, that ties in.
Yeah.
And then also our trip back through Floyd.
Oh, and we have to talk about Earth Treasures.
And Earth Treasures. Okay, so let's pause this now. You ready?
Yeah, I don't remember how we left off.
I don't know. Like everything has changed since obviously our clothes have changed, and like what most people would do is they would do a different video. They'd be like, this is a different recording, the clothes are changed, we're gonna like, that was one video and this is a different video, but this is gonna be spliced together.
Yeah.
And so from the viewer's perspective, like no change has just happened. They just saw like, we just pulled in, we were like in a car, and now we're here in different clothes. And what I'm telling the viewer is so much has changed since that last recording.
Yeah.
How many days ago was that?
That was last week. That was Thursday.
Was that Thursday?
That was Thursday.
And what day is today? Monday. It's like a life.
We planted 100 trees this weekend. That happened.
That definitely happened.
That'll make it feel like a lot has happened.
And we've confirmed that June 15th.
Yep.
So in, what is that? Is that 7 weeks? More or less.
The rest of April, May, and June 15th.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
8 weeks.
Maybe, yeah.
Something like that. We're definitely moving out of the place, the meeting house.
Well, we signed an agreement to leave June 15th.
We signed an agreement, thank you. That's a very accurate way of stating it. So what we
Who knows what will happen?
Who knows what will happen, but what I think is interesting, and the reason why I want to bring this up, is the first half of this recording, there was, at least from my perspective, speaking, I was coming from a position of like, okay, what's the future looking like? What, leaning into this idea of being a wanderer. And at which point it was unclear whether or not we were staying in the meeting house. Now, since then, it is more clear that come mid-June, we'll be stepping out.
Have you ever called it the meeting house before?
I don't think so.
We just started calling it the meeting house now that it's the leaving house.
now that we're leaving.
We signed the agreement to leave on June 15th when we had one of the largest meetings at the house, where the person who owns the house said, I've never had this many people meet in this house. All the people who planted trees with us, we all ate together in the kitchen, and it's a tiny 1790 stone home.
Yes.
So that's ironic.
That we agreed to leave after. Well, the irony is the owner of the home holds a vision of it's not his primary residence, but of it becoming or having some sort of communal hub role. But it never actually became, in his experience, he's never seen that materialize. And so when we agreed to leave was after you set up this event, this tree planting event. Mm-hmm. And so there's a sense of well, I guess there's a couple ways of looking at it, but now that we're framing it up this way, what's popping in my mind is well, the work that needed to be done has been done. Mm-hmm. And so now...
Mary Poppins.
Just like Mary Poppins. Just like Mary Poppins. And just prior to recording this video today, looking at when this journey began for me, when I left the house in Millersville on February 2nd, 2022, and 2 days after we vacate on June 15th. On the 17th, we're going to be officiating a wedding. So I see those as endpoints. They're exactly 500 days. So So whatever 500 days represents, I don't want to put a meaning on 500 days equals this, but it's kind of a clear, it's a time period. And so I'm like, okay. And so now let's go back to where we began this conversation, this wandering. Mm-hmm. And even more so, I would like to tie it into. I guess we didn't even finish the.
Yeah. You have to tell the story in Venice.
Okay.
About Venice.
All right. So I'll go and I'll finich that statement, then we'll go back to, because if people are watching, this is probably the most disjointed of all of the videos, but I think it's because there's so much activity happening as we're recording it. So we've mentioned many times when we began recording the first chapter of A Story Waiting to Pierce You, and that's kind of fizzled out, at least for the time period, because of the legal pressures.
Right.
But in that book, and we talked about, there's a resonance which I think both you and I feel with the character of Barris, as someone who travels about, and the role of the rise and fall of time, of civilization is how it's framed up in the book, but I see it probably in a slightly larger way. But anyway, he moves around with an arrow, and here's our arrow. Here's our Barris's arrow.
Yeah.
And bringing everyone, go right ahead. Bringing everyone up to speed about this idea of, being a wanderer with purpose, and our time at the meeting house is being done in 500 days and all, and everything that comes along with that, and particularly as I was expressing my own personal, discomfort. I'm like, all right, am I really stepping into it? It's going back to, for whatever reason, that book's about a traveler a wanderer who had this arrow that carries him. And I made this arrow years and years ago before I knew what it was. And, it's certainly real-time hindsight. What I mean by, at this moment, being able to look back at the years that have led up to this moment in time, and all of these things which seemingly happened for different purposes, it's lining up perfectly. And what is it lining up to is the continuation of being carried by this arrow as we step into this mission. And what I would say the mission ultimately is as a Barris in the book, he just went in circles around the land.
Purifying.
Mm-hmm. And so what does purifying look like, at least in our lexicon, in our actual living experience? It's collapsing false timelines through natural astrology starboard ceremonies. And as we've been talking about, like, weird ass shit happens. Owls freak out, tree frogs jump out, raccoons come out. We're touching a layer of reality, or maybe a layer of reality is touching us, which is deeper than what most people experience.
All of the stones landing in, like, it's almost like a Ouija board.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the stones kind of seem to take a life of their own, too, whenever we have significant interactions with the stones on the board.
So I guess going back to then the final part of our
story, the wrap-up of Venice.
I think there are a couple things which I'd like to share about Venice as well. And what I think is happening, like the purpose of this, what is going to be probably a 4-episode series of Adventures in the Shift, though I can see using that title going forward because it seems to make sense. It is maybe a demonstration.
Go ahead.
A demonstration, or like a coming attraction, or a trailer, or something along those lines of what it is to come, both in what we're sharing with the witnesses here, and then hopefully soon the participants. We hopefully get to meet people, but then also seeing, like, this is where we're going. All right. So what pieces do you want to add in, or where do you want to pick up with Venice?
The two key stories in my reflections on Venice would be the Kid Rock. Okay. And the Herkimer Diamond.
All right. And they're linked. All right. So we'll set the stage. It was our last day. Our last full day. Our last day before we had to leave. Wasn't it?
Does that all happen on the same day?
It all happened on the same day. It all happened on the same day because the next day we left.
Yep.
So it culminated. So you and I wanted a full day at the beach. Yes. And we hadn't actually been to Venice Beach yet. We've been to, like, a variety of beaches nearby. And we arrived at the Venice Beach early. And one of the reasons we wanted to go to Venice is because there was
Earth Treasures.
There was a store which you had purchased some things years earlier, and you wanted to see if they wanted to buy it back, return it to the source, and complete a loop. And we also wanted to have a full day at the beach because we both like the beach. So we go to Venice, and the Venice beach which we went to, I would say, was the most active. Like, the most amount of people were there. Like, there's the most amount of...
Like 100 people for the yoga class in the morning.
Yes, there's a beach yoga class, and usually the beaches we had been to before had been much less populated. And this was a different feel. Though it didn't feel like you're like at the Jersey Shore or anything, but still so we go there. So then where do we want to go with this story?
Well, I think we got to the point where we realized that we were going to be able to stay because we got there really early in the morning. We found a turtle eggshell.
Oh yeah.
Like, we did a nice walk, and we're just kind of easing into taking on the I guess, like, the ocean energy, like the...
And also knowing it was the last day there.
And
knowing that we're going to be returning home and all this sort of...
How could we absorb as much of the shift as possible, right?
Right,
because the ocean is constantly, like, land and sea are constantly shifting with the tides.
Okay,
right.
There
so
we go.
to me, the ocean is very, like, I don't like the word healing, but it's very soothing to the soul.
Right.
Especially when your life is shifting and you're collapsing false timelines and you're syncing with all of the big rhythms around you. The ocean is a huge rhythm.
Right.
So we were in the midst of kind of, like, taking that in and also preparing for a big shift home.
And we had gotten there early in the morning, so
Very
it wasn't
early.
crowded. So the spot we had was probably like, it became like an epicenter. Like it was the easiest place from a parking area for a lot of people to arrive who don't want to walk far. And throughout the day, throughout our time there, like it went from being, we were the only ones in the sand to suddenly we're surrounded by a whole bunch of people.
We were surrounded by Russians.
It was all Eastern European. It was very funny. And but what happened, and the point of the story where we're going right now is someone came up and they approached us.
As we were like sitting up from a nap, like getting ready to pack up.
And we look out of place because everyone there, like they've got a lot of beach gear.
Yeah.
They've got like a tent, they've got an umbrella, they've got chairs, and
coolers.
They've got coolers. And we weren't, I think, planning to be at the beach for very long.
Mm-mm.
We thought it was just going to be morning, and I think we had a towel
we totally
and a bag.
Looked like drifters.
We looked like drifters, and we're changing. I think I changed out of my bathing suit, like into shorts, like 3 times, like just with the towel on top of me, like flashing all of the people around. But like, so
all the Eastern European women who were laying on blankets around us.
I like to put on a show. And so we're there, and then suddenly, like, this woman walks up. Mm-hmm. And she was an American woman.
With an iPad in her hand.
And
I thought she was going to ask you for directions. But she didn't. What did she say?
Well, she came up, and I had this hat on, and my hair was...
Oh!
All right, so we'll do this. All right, should I do it? We'll see what people think. So I had... The hair was down, and I had this.
Yep.
And I didn't have, I guess I had like more
guy?
of like a beach shirt, like a shirt with, I didn't have like the Rasta necklace. We've got that on for a different reason. But she thought I was Kid Rock.
Not only did she think he was Kid Rock, she further went on to ask if she could take a picture with him.
And because once I'm like, no, I'm not Kid Rock. She's like, well, my sister's the biggest Kid Rock fan, and it was April 1st, and could I take a picture and I could say I'm that Kid Rock on the beach, and so I got to be Kid Rock, and I did like a Kid Rock pose.
Yep.
Which I don't think I've ever actually done in my life. Like
You should have told her you were a professional Kid Rock impersonator and you charge.
But
charge per photo.
What was funny, and so this goes into I guess the question I have about AI. I would say like 2 days later, once we were back home, and my main source of popular news comes from the website Daily News. Mm-hmm. It's a UK-based kind of like tabloidy sort of things, and front and center was this whole big story about Kid Rock.
Right.
And I felt that was kind of interesting. So there was the Kid Rock.
And prior to being mistaken for Kid Rock, you had been thinking about Kid Rock.
And I had been thinking about Kid Rock. It was funny, yes.
Randomly.
Yes. So all right. So I'm going to go before we do to the Earth Treasures. I want to take this story full cycle all the way to Floyd.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Okay. But it's going to be short. It's not going to be long. So So like. The Kid Rock story is interesting is because when we first met up with Derek and Emily, you all were singing, and you sing beautifully, and I was very evident. I have an ear for song and for voice, and I'm also completely aware of my lack.
No, baby.
And so I'm holding in my mind as I was listening to you, I was like, has there ever been like, I'm trying to think of like someone who's like a singer but not really a good singer. And I was thinking though of Kid Rock. Kid Rock is who came in my mind because I know that there was this song like from like 20 years ago particularly that it was a duet with Sheryl Crow. Mm-hmm. And like in that song, like, he like kind of stretches his vocal ability and it's kind of like a joke within the song, I think. But that was the narrative in my head. And that was like 2 days or 3 days before then the Kid Rock impersonation. Because I was like, well, if Kid Rock could have done it, well, gosh darn it, I can too. And so like I was thinking that, and then the lady sees me as Kid Rock. So then, so this is where we're going to like jump forward.
Yeah.
So we drive home to the next day. We're driving a long ass trip, and we spontaneously see if we can stay at the bobsledder's house, Bree and Austin's house in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they're like, yeah, of course you can go do that. And we stay there, and we arrive at 9 o'clock. They're like, well, let's go out to eat. And we go to this kind of like Charlotte sort of hole in the wall, sort of like NASCAR, like local bar.
Yeah.
And we go in there, and as soon as we walk in, they play that Kid Rock Sheryl Crow song, which is 20 years old. Like, it's not in any normal rotation. And so I was like, so that was the second sort of like...
1, 2, 3.
The second hit, the third, it began with like Kid Rock and Sheryl Crow in my mind. I'm mistaken as Kid Rock. Then we actually played the song. We told the story to Derek and Emily.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, let's go play the song. And they pulled it up on their phone, and we listened to the song while still in Venice. Then we heard that song on the radio in Charlotte at Austin and Bree's house. And then the next day we decided to go and
we stayed at Bree and Austin's
for the night.
So that we could also be, we could wake up and go to Floyd on the way home.
Correct. We wanted to.
Because it was so late.
We wanted to drive home. We didn't want to complete the drive up the 95 corridor, and we could go up more of a western part of Virginia. And there's a small town called Floyd, Virginia, which is known for like their bluegrass scene. Like literally a town of 400.
Yeah,
folk music, bluegrass, and Floyd Fest. Like that's that's like kind of what it's known for. So we stopped by there on Sunday, and at the country store, the general country store
has a jam circle every Sunday afternoon.
And so we pull up there, and we get out of the car, and we walk in, and we're in this country store for like no more than like 5 minutes when someone comes up and actually recognizes, not just me, but recognizes both of us. And we've done, I think, 2 videos, and these videos aren't maybe like less than 1,000 people have been watching them. And so there's this integration.
And they saw you for you.
Yeah,
not as Kid Rock.
Yeah, they saw me as me. They're like, Michael, is that you? Uncle Mike. I don't know if they called me Uncle Mike or Michael.
She called you Michael.
She called me Michael, and then she pointed to you. She said, I don't remember your name, but I know you because I just heard about the owl.
Right.
And so I guess with the point with all this story, this point with like this collapsing false timelines, the point with like these stories which we're telling, which in my mind are more like interactive demonstrations. Like there's a thing that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
That's it?
That's it.
Well, and then you came home and Kid Rock popped up on your newsfeed. So
okay.
I'm curious, like, what this Kid Rock thing is.
Well, the one thing which is interesting is Kid Rock is probably maybe one of the only, like, quote-unquote celebrities I've ever actually seen in reality.
Oh, you've met?
I didn't meet him, and I think I told you this story on the car ride home.
Yeah, you didn't, and I don't remember.
This was, like, there was once upon a time, like, Kid Rock was not a cultural icon, and then he became a cultural icon, and it was, like let's say it was the summer of 2000. Like, it was around that time frame. It was, like, the late 1990s, and I can't remember the name of the song, but it was very popular. And he used to have, like, there was, like, a little person, right? Like, you can't say midget anymore, but he like, that was part of, like, the Kid Rock, like, I don't know if he was in a band then, but it was right when they were becoming like culturally relevant. And I was still like involved in culture at that point. I was working in like the technology industry, and I was on my lunch break in Northern Virginia, and I went into the grocery stores in Fairfax, Virginia, which was right by like a pretty large, a place where they do a lot of outdoor events in Fairfax. And I saw Kid Rock and the little guy, like, in the grocery store. Only time I've ever seen, like, a celebrity, like, and it was, like, before they were, like, famous, but I knew who they were. So, like, maybe just in hindsight, like, the idea of, like, being recognized. And this was the only person I've ever recognized in that whole sort of experience. Like, that would be the bow which I want to put onto this story. And why Kid Rock, maybe recognition?
Interesting.
Okay.
And you were just talking earlier today about self-fulfilling prophecy or just prophetic in general, like something happens in your mind or something happens where you're at a distance from the thing, and then now like 5 or 10 years later you're now in the thing that you observed, or you had these thoughts about yourself and then they manifest forward like 10 years later.
Yes.
But they weren't just random thoughts, or in your journal, they were powerful, present, everyday thoughts for a long period of time. I mean, this is kind of like law of attraction manifestation stuff, right? Like
Completely.
if you think something
Right.
and you're in it and yourself and you magnetize it towards you, whether it's the next day or 5 or 10 years later.
Okay.
So I'm feeling like maybe, what is Kid Rock's real name? Anyways, so there's something there.
Well, okay, so
recognizing yourself, and because you then said like you tied this to like Floyd, Virginia, and someone recognizing you for you, like, and saying Michael.
Yes.
Because like I know you have a thing with introducing yourself as Michael.
I don't introduce myself as Michael.
But
well, I want to go. So what you're talking about, what you alluded to was, I made reference. I was telling you earlier today how I used to have these fantasies. Like fantasy is like in a general sense, like these very clear, like idealizations. Is that the word I want to use? Like it wasn't like a fantasy, like a sexual. Yeah.
Ideals.
Like, but just this like story in my head, which is playing out, and it was me. This like 4 years ago, just like living in a car and like moving about and how I would do that, and I would like fantasize like, well, what would be in my bags and what would like it was like that. Like I didn't have any plan on doing it. It was more like, if anything, escapism.
Okay.
Like that's what I mean, like fantasies. But that's what's coming into reality. And so what you were saying about with the law of attraction or manifestation, like the question which I have, and I don't have, I'm not trying to answer it, is like, what was it? Like, is this just like what you're describing? Is that the nature of reality, that I magnetized myself for something like that and then it came? Or was that more like, in what makes more sense to me in what I'm seeing with the 500 days and the this and the order? Was it more so like, like some sort of
foreshadow?
Or precognition, or this has happened before,
you were
or
picking
like
up on something, you needed to be tweaked by life.
Whatever it was, like that was going to happen, and I had like a touch of it. I didn't realize to what extent. And what's funny is how we're talking about in the beginning of this episode of like me becoming comfortable. Like me is like the individual identified with the storyline of Mike Wan. Is like, I don't know, like, do I really want to go and have this experience? It doesn't matter. I'm already on the roller coaster. I'm going, and it's happening, and like describing it in real time. But then also like, I don't think I'm unique. I think this is just the nature of reality.
Oh, baby, you're unique.
And all of us who are on this ride together.
Yeah.
So unless you have a comment about that, let's go back to Earth Treasures.
Yes.
Because Earth Treasures was a big story for you. It was well, and for me as well, for both of us.
Both of us. Like,
but it was driven by you.
It was the completion of the shift that we were like really maybe looking for, or like I mean, I guess we weren't even looking for it. Just like, like
I needed it. I need a bookend. Like, I see life in chapters, and like
I needed to just like spread myself out on the shores, the floor of Venice, and stay there forever.
I needed it to be a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end.
So,
and this was like, and we were going down because there were a couple pieces of jewelry which you wanted to return to a place. And that was like, and that was of all of like the, like, let's plan a trip. To me, in my mind, I was like, okay, that is solid. That's a real thing, and this is going to happen. Like I could write it down. This is going to like, that's what I mean. And so this was the final. This is why we went to Venice Beach.
And the last day.
All right.
Well, and so Earth Treasures...
And we go there right after the whole sort of Kid Rock experience.
Right. And Earth Treasures is it's primarily a fossil store and fossil like boutique.
Okay.
Like the Don at Earth Treasures is in the area, like he's an expert, and people like reach out to him from all over the United States. Teachers reach out to him from all over the United States to get his like specialty knowledge and research on fossils.
Okay.
And he just...
Particularly as it relates to the fossils in that, like Venice, like there's a lot of...
Right, there's like a special like bed, something about the Earth's structure and shape and ancient history. Like there's a lot of fossils in the river and in the Gulf there. Higher
concentration than in other places.
Right.
And Earth Treasures is this really charming boutique,
It's a nice
in the
mixture.
town of Venice, and it's walking distance theoretically from the beach itself.
Yeah, nice mixture of like fossils, crystals, jewelry. And so I had a piece of jewelry a few years ago when I went there, and he had a matching piece that went with the one that I already had.
Okay.
And the reason that I had bought that matching piece was no longer so it was no longer in play in my life. And at the same time that I found that other piece of jewelry, I also took a fossil to him that I had found, a very large chunk that I was like, well, there was nothing around it. It hadn't washed up. I was way offshore, just kind of snorkeling
That
around.
you found in the water,
that I
snorkeling.
found in the water, snorkeling. And here it was like a 200,000 old...
200 million.
200 million? Is that what he said?
I don't know.
You're right. He speaks in millions because
Right.
that's how old the fossils are. And it was a crocodile jaw.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to say, like, here's the holes where the teeth went in, and here's the part of the jaw that it is. He had another piece that was kind of similar to it.
Okay.
Like a larger one. So just this like animal medicine that keeps coming up. And
Yes.
crocodiles and their jaws, like they snatch and they store their prey under logs to like let them tenderize, like let the meat tenderize.
Sounds succulent.
Sounds succulent. So whatever that cycle of completion was for me, it was like a cycle of like tenderizing.
Okay.
So like the crocodile and that jewelry and like returning that piece.
I see what you're saying with that. Right.
Returning that piece of jewelry along with my piece, which
a softening, a softening.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's when you tenderize meat, like you,
right.
like that. You take like I'm thinking about this from a human perspective, like a cut of meat which is normally too grisly, but you can cure it or tenderize it in a way that it becomes not just palatable, but like really
yummy.
Succulent. So actually it was the right word.
Yeah, it was the right word. So I returned that piece and the piece that I had before I came to that shop. And I said to him, like, could you, and Don is just like, I'm going to start trying to paint this character so you can finish the story.
All right.
Don is like, he's the owner, operator, manager of Earth Treasures. There's other fossil stores in Venice because of it being such a hotbed of fossils, but it's like cheesy names. I don't even know the other fossil stores. I will only go to Earth Treasures because of Don. And he's like...
Have you been to the other places?
I mean, I've walked by them and I don't even want to go inside.
You won't even go in. I can definitely appreciate...
One is maybe like Feisty Fossils or something.
Feisty Fossils?
Silly, something so ridiculous. Don is so
I don't
legit.
know. I poke my head
and
Feisty
so
Fossils.
Sweet.
Don is
and
legit.
He's so tender. He's
been tenderized.
He's like an oracle.
All right.
So I set down this jewelry and I'm like, well, are you willing to do a trade with me?
No, that's not what happened.
It's not?
No, what's happened? You went in, I walked in with you, and then you and him start talking about something else.
Right. We talked for a bit.
And I'm quick. Uh-huh. And I was like, all right, this is not
I
good.
needed to know what was happening.
You needed to know what happened. So
the
I walked out. And I think I went outside. I went to a bench outside after I did a full search and I looked at every single thing in the store. I walked out. You're still talking there, and I'm like, I'm going to sit for 20 minutes. I'm going to allow this to happen. And I sit for 20 minutes. I had to take care of like some business, and I come back in, and you're like, okay, I'm glad you came back in, Don. This is the real reason why we're here.
Okay, all right, thank you for the setup. So after I caught up, I mean, the hurricane really knocked Venice down, and so I was kind of checking in with him. Because, he's that kind of guy.
Right.
Like, you can drop right into, like, almost a personal relationship. And so I asked him if he would be willing to do, an exchange or whatever. And not only was he willing to do, like, a store credit, like, trade exchange with other pieces of finds that he had from estate sales, etc. But he was like willing to like take that next step further, closer to us, and like share about experiences that he has had of having to like release things from the past. And he like sat there and I couldn't choose because there was a third piece of jewelry that looked very much like the pieces that I was letting go of, right? And so he goes into this whole thing with me and with you and I about what the different stones like mean and represent. And the one that I have right now, really hit home. And he was like, well, first of all, it's Larimar. And he started talking about it, and I was like filling in the spaces for him, and we were having this exchange. I know Larimar because it's from the Dominican Republic. My daughter is half Dominican. And, you know, he went right into the, like, yeah, it's like the ocean and it's different blues and, like, the sky. He's like, it's the heaven and the earth. And I was just like, oh, my gosh, okay, Don, like, you've totally, he did it for me. Like, he walked me through the whole process that I needed to go through to, like, let go of this tenderizing season and like move into, you know, I was saying like I wanted to go to Venice and this area to complete the adventures in the shift to like we're always syncing with the moon, and every time I think about the moon I think about the tides, and I think about the land and sea always exchanging and wanting to be like soaking that energy.
Are you going to
in.
sing the song from this
No,
episode?
I'm not going to sing any song.
There's a song about the land and the sea and the tides, and I asked for it to be and with a dance.
Yes. I don't know if I'm ever going to dance on YouTube. But anyways, it just completed like a huge cycle in my life and you know, we have this like, I have a piece to kind of like commemorate it. And Don was just such a beautiful character and person, human being in this whole like, he was like a shift master. You know, he could see immediately like what was happening in me and like what you were to me and how we were interacting in this bigger story. And then you were looking at things as well.
All right. So I'm going to add before I go.
Go ahead and add. You're a much better storyteller than I am.
All right. So so just like throw in a couple small like details, because it's the details, I think, which always makes stories so much fun. I was like, there's no friggin' way this guy's gonna buy back this. Like, this is a small shop owner. You're coming back like a year later. You got this jewelry, you've been wearing it. It's got like wear and tear.
2 years later,
wear and tear. I'm thinking in my mind, and because I could think like regular people. And I'm thinking, because I don't want to be a wet towel. I don't want to be like, I'm like, baby, he ain't gonna buy it. He's not gonna take that back. But I'm thinking that. And
you don't know Don.
But you're right, I didn't know Don, and that's one of the reasons I stepped out, because it's like I knew I was carrying that energy, and I didn't want to bring that in. Like, yeah. I'm like, I don't want to interfere, because you got your own magic, and I don't want to interfere with that. So we walk out, and so I was a little bit when I walked back in, and you said, now we could talk about what we're talking about, or why I came here. I was like, crackers. It didn't happen. But sure enough, but that's the whole thing with Don. It was like you kind of like you approach this idea of like, hey, I bought this from you. Will you buy it back from me? And he really was like the way he carries himself as a merchant of valuable artifacts. Like he took it to a deep level. Like that was there, and I saw that. The ring which you got had a lot of like significance on multiple levels. The one which is on your finger right now. But what I thought was most interesting, two things. So when we went to Charlotte afterwards, the idea of stones and rings came back up with Austin and Brie. Oh yeah. Right. So like stones and rings and personalized stones and rings were in the air. But then when we got back, I put on I've got a sweater I've had for at least 20 years. It's a beautiful cashmere sweater, and it's got a little hole in it, and I embroidered it, and everyone always notices it. It's a real simple sweater, and it's got a hole right here, and I embroidered like this blue around it. Yeah. And people always ask me, they're curious. It's like, you know me with my embroidery, my clothes. Your ring fits in the hole perfectly, and it's the exact same color as the embroidery. So again, like this idea of things syncing up. So that happened. Yeah. So that being said, yours and Don's experience and how he met you, like all of that was like, this could be a commercial for Earth Treasures. Go there, go meet Don, tell him we sent you, and you get a 10% discount. No, that won't happen. But maybe, see, can we get a 10% discount? But what did happen was, we've been using a different set of stones on this traveling starboard kit. And I've traveled with the original starboard before for years, and it's always been very, very like cumbersome. It's big and it's heavy and blah, blah, blah. And now that we've got the small one, I'm like, this is so easy to travel with. And like I could demonstrate it, you know, so if people want to buy it. And we still have the original starboard at the meeting house, and on there are the original stones for the planets. And so we got a whole new set, and that was so much friggin' fun to go and do that. And I love this whole new set. And when we went to the villages and we pulled out the stones for the planets, and I loved doing this, being able to pull out the stones to a bunch of people who were very knowledgeable of both stone archetypes and planetary archetypes. They could see why these stones were representative of the planets. Like, that was a lot of fun. And of the people in the villages, there, the astrologers of the villages, there was one woman who, on my internal radar system, I'm like, that woman knows what she's talking about. And when we're pulling out all the stones, when I pulled out my Mars stone, she was like, that ain't Mars. And I knew she was right. And there was an original Mars stone. There was a whole, like, you know,
it was a lava stone.
It was a lava stone. It was like there was
sense.
It was because it was fiery, but when I knew that I wanted to get a new stone for Mars. And when I was in Don's place, I was like, okay, this will give me an opportunity to pick out a new Mars stone. I wanted to link it into Earth treasures, because at this point I already knew that, like, you and Don had this conversation, like, you know, this was the second time I was in, and like that was going to happen. So I'm like, okay, this is a good place for us. I'm like, I'm going to get the Mars stone there. So I went and I get the Mars stone, and I'm like, okay. And when it was
be careful, it's a tiny bit wet in here.
like right now it's filming. So like if we were to ever to release, what are they called? Like
B-roll?
outtakes? B-roll.
Well, B-roll is different than outtakes.
All right.
A B-roll is just like maybe like OnlyFans footage.
Fans footage?
OnlyFans. Like if we just wanted a B-roll of just like, here they are in their everyday life.
That's B-roll?
Uh-huh. Well,
I thought OnlyFans was like
it is.
adult content.
It's adult content, but if you wanted to make like an actual like production and not just have it be like
Just adult contenting?
filming fucking. Here they are in the grocery store.
Fuck.
Here they are in the field. Here they are in the bedroom.
Is that the song?
Don't you know it? It's like the 80s porn song.
I think that's not really the case.
Okay, so you can come closer to me.
If I come closer to you.
Oh wait, this is bad because the sun's behind us.
But you can't, it looks better if you go like,
Okay, alright.
I mean, the problem is, I think that's got us better. There's the two of us. You can't tell because, yeah, you see how.
There you go.
Yeah.
Keep the hat there for a second.
So
Okay.
you can't see the top of my head.
How can we get the top of your head in?
Like this.
Oh, look at Wilt. She loves being here with us.
All right.
Wilt, I want to take you on our adventures.
Should be a great travel cat, other than the fact that she doesn't like to travel.
Oh,
Like, she likes to be around us.
Yeah.
All right. So, are we going to begin? We're good.
How's my hair look?
Perfect.
I always see that.
I know. It's easier too. You want to show the cat?
Yeah, start like this. Like Wilt the cat says hello.
All right. All right. Ready for a countdown?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
We're back.
So you're probably, if you're paying attention, you'll notice a lot has changed. Probably most
We said that last time.
most noticeably, I am now on your right, and you're on my left.
Correct.
But then also the background has changed as well.
And Wilt is here.
More technology.
more technology.
Isn't that how this whole thing began, as we talked about the technology issues driving down? Well, we were recording, and then the battery died, and then we probably talked for another 20 minutes before we realized, and now we're here. So we're going to pick up where...
on like our first video.
The very first video we talked about, about us and technology.
We've had a full journey of technology issues, and it's been good for the last couple of videos.
It's been better.
Until just today.
It's been better.
It's been better.
It's been better. So now here we are.
So here we are, picking up where we left off on
And
Mars.
the last thing that was said was I was telling the story of going into Earth Treasures.
Yeah.
And how I needed a Mars stone. And it's telling the story a second time. It's hard to elicit the same energy. So I'm going to just tell the Cliff Notes version.
Okay.
So I go in there. I find a stone, which to me was a appropriate Mars stone, a new Mars stone, better than the lava stone, and I was excited to add that to the new Starboard stone traveling kit because it was becoming evident that Earth Treasures was a meaningful place, and at the very least it connected us to this journey to Venice or West Florida. So I pick up the stone and I go, and when Don goes to write up your piece, your stone, and I brought the sweater so we can go show how that fits in a moment.
Okay.
When he goes to go and write it up, he said, no charge for the stone. He said the stone was free. It was a $2 stone, so it wasn't a big deal.
It was a gesture.
It was a gesture. It was a gesture of generosity. And it was meaningful. Now he's linked to the Starboard, and the Starboard is such a part. But the nature of our natural astrology Starboard sessions is it's the stars and the river and the stars, and we also now have a connection to Don and the Susquehanna. Right.
How did that come about?
So,
Ooh.
Do you want to say?
Well, I'm just trying to because telling the story a second time is like.
What did we say? What did we say? I don't remember.
Remember, the transaction was complete. The
financial, the
trade,
card. Yeah.
The trade, the monetary exchange.
The nuts and bolts of us walking out with merchandise without getting arrested.
Right. That was over. But just the nature of Don's, the way that he holds space in the store is he didn't make his the feedback loop wasn't complete though, because he's now can I tell you the story? We both asked about his necklace separately.
Okay.
We both said something about his necklace, and he kind of waited until after our whole story, our whole process of wrapping up that shift for me, as commemorated in the jewelry, and you kind of wrapping up your linkage to the store and the energy there. And then he was like, before you leave, can I tell you my story?
That is true.
Of the necklace.
And let me add this one more thing. He waited till the container of
the
buying, the mercantile.
Yeah.
That was done, and now we're talking outside of that. That's not part of it. He's not telling this to make himself more endearing so that we're more willing to that is out. Now this is human being to human being.
Yeah.
I'm sharing. You told me a piece of you. Now I'm telling you a piece of me, which is outside of anything.
As an oracle, he is skilled and he has crafted his exchange manners.
All right. So then what happens?
So
he's got a necklace.
Right, and it went missing for 4 years.
Okay.
And he found it again after 4 years. It was in the pocket of a tent.
And that was the point of his story. He was telling us about letting go of things and how they come back, and he had a certain perspective of why he was telling us a story about this necklace being lost and how it came back. And it was almost like a detail, part of the setting of his story, that he says, I was camping and I went into my tent and tucked into my tent, which must have been the last time I wore that necklace. When I used that tent is where I put it. And he just so happened to mention where he was when he last used that tent. Or no, where he found it.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
Yeah.
He mentioned a location.
Where he put the tent up again.
Okay.
And when he like put the tent up, he was in it, and he was like not looking for it anymore
Right.
because it was 4 years.
Right.
And so it was a surprise. Could you
Yes.
imagine that surprise?
It was a wonderful
Like,
surprise.
holding on to something being gone for 4 years.
So where was it? Where did he find it?
He found the necklace, which had significant meaning, which is kind of relevant to my story of why I was there, at Herkimer, New York.
At Herkimer, New York.
Herkimer, New York.
Which is the home, the location, the only place in the world where you find Herkimer diamonds, which is tied directly to the Susquehanna mystery, as the Herkimer diamond is a very, very unique quartz crystal, and it is located, it's only found in Herkimer, a double terminated water clear quartz crystal, and it is located less than 20 miles from the beginnings of the Susquehanna River. And so within my telling of the Susquehanna mystery, those two are intimately linked. So when he said that, he said like, wow, this I found in Herkimer, you got all excited. You're like, is that Herkimer? I'm like, that's Herkimer. And he's like, you guys know Herkimer? I'm like, of course we know Herkimer. And he's like, oh, hold on for 1 second. And he goes into his glass secret drawer, and he pulls out this bowl of, they were small Herkimers, like maybe about the size of like an almond. Mm-hmm. And he goes and he hands me one. And I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. And he puts away the rest of the stones. And I'm like, is this for me? He's like, yes. He's like, no charge. And I'm like, I can't take this. He's like, of course you can. You know, we don't, as you said, it's not often that people come in here that really appreciate the nature of Herkimer. Mm-hmm. Having absolutely no idea of like mine and your history of like Susquehanna mystery and all of that sort of stuff. So
the Herkimer that broke when we met.
Yes.
The Herkimer that I gave you, the Herkimer that broke for you. Like there's
that
so
lost.
much that you lost.
I lost.
You lost one. Sean broke his, and then I gave you one. Is that the?
I lost mine right before. I had a big Herkimer, and I lost it probably maybe a month before I went down. But I had that Herkimer for at least 4 years. It was
wow.
It was a really meaningful one, and I lost it in a really kind of, I lost it in a very paralleled experience to you returning your jewelry.
Ah, okay. Story for another time.
But it was like meaningful like that, like, you know, putting something back,
right.
Giving something back.
So Don has no idea except for that he's like an intuitive, you know, oracle figure, and he blessed us with this Herkimer.
And he blessed us with the Herkimer.
And in return, like there was a dynamic feedback loop where, you know, we were like, you have no idea how much this means to us. He's like, yeah, I do. My hands bled pulling that out of the earth. And we were like, well, also, and then we were able to kind of complete some loops telling him about the Susquehanna River and like what your work is. And as soon as we got home, we sent him a whole packet of Susquehanna River mystery.
The Rights to the 40th Parallel and some of the postcards. And it's tricky now because I'm thinking about all the things which we said before, and it's hard to recreate magic, isn't it? Or yes. the spontaneity. But I think we're going to find something new with this one, because I think I'm ready to start wrapping this up. Or was there anything else that we did not cover that we want to go?
When we left the store.
Oh yes. Okay. Now I know it's you. Okay. Yes.
So a big part of the final adventures and the shift, or you and I going on this like pilgrimage mission to collapse false timelines around starboard ceremonies, going south. For me, I was like, I think I said this already, but like the moon and the tides and the ocean.
Yes.
A lot of this for me was like, all right, now I'm going to be washed by the energy of all the quartz and the sand and the water. And, you know, like, not really, like, you know, I don't ever think about this stuff or, like, plan or, like, this is how it's going to be. Like, I'm not curating an experience for myself. Mm-hmm. I'm just, like, kind of following intuition and desire. And walking outside, after he gave you that Herkimer, and we had such a dynamic and deep exchange over really profound artifacts for all of us, for all three of us. I walked out, and you've helped me. So I have a lot of somatic, visceral body experiences that are linked to something, and I don't always know like what they're linked to, but I feel them really strongly. And so you've helped me understand those, and some of them, and for example, one of them being like when I get like the shakes and I'm not really cold. You described it as being in the doorway of the portal, because standing in the doorway, there's always a little bit of a breeze, like it's always a little chilly. When we walked out of, when we walked out of Earth Treasures, it was like in my body was feeling like we had leapt through like 3 portal doors in a matter of moments.
I remember using the phrase jumping tracks. You felt like you jumped tracks again, like we just jumped tracks again.
Yes, and then it made sense. I was like, oh yeah, like this is the last day of this pretty profound trip for me, for us, for like the mission of Susquehanna Alchemy, like being like launching into this new territory of life. Yeah.
We started recording these videos. What was the first one we recorded? Was it at the Villages?
Yes.
Okay, the first one we did it was at the Villages, after we did the first half of the journey, not realizing where we were going to end up, and now we're concluding this is going to be the last one of the videos.
Are you going into wrap up?
A little bit, but I just want to point out like this idea of like what we did not realize when we started talking about it, that we were going to be like there was going to be no plan, but we had a sense that this was worthy of recording.
Right.
Worthy of recording. And then I guess now talking about the wandering, talking about where we're going to go, like that to me felt like very much like this was an appetizer, this was an initiation, this was like all these different sort of words to describe what is going to be coming going forward with our experiences together, but then also like out on the on-ground reality, bringing this type of magic to, sharing it with other people and experiencing their magic.
And so experiencing magic with others, because this is the link. So the last time I remember you saying in the stuff that didn't record a bit ago that you remember, like you don't have the same body experience as I do, but you can tell when I'm having, you can sense it, and you remarked that the last time like you remember me in that specific type of somatic experience was at the petroglyphs.
Yes.
And so we were making the link between like petroglyphs, rocks, Earth Treasures was full of rocks and fossils, and just like these portals, for me anyways, these portals of like mega shift, like jumping tracks, like initiating into the next big mystery is marked by the petroglyphs on the Susquehanna River, and then like Earth Treasures.
Right.
So these rocks and these really, really old, are you looking at the geese?
I'm looking at the geese.
So funny, right now we're out on the farm and the geese are slowly making their way over here. Hopefully they won't attack.
They get aggressive. They get really aggressive.
Okay. So, and we were with Zach and Nicole,
who we planted the trees with.
Which
we talked about in the very beginning of
right.
this video.
And when we were in Venice, we were with Derek and Emily. And so just this...
And they were who were the trigger for the first time we went to Florida, like which... the like everything, I guess the point is like the interconnectedness of other human beings,
and the on the ground work, like experiencing magic with other people, and like tying this work as a vehicle to touch the ground and to touch like face to face, arm to arm with other folks who are in this spirit of collapsing false time, being open to like the experience of a meta paradigm shift.
And this is what it looks like.
And this is what it looks like.
Like it doesn't look like you see like Norway spiral portals open up in the sky yet. It's just like you go through and you have these particularly when you have eyes to look for it, these incredibly tangible,
shared
tangible experiences that are quite evident that there's something that is more foundational than our cultural time system.
Magic, inspiration.
All of that.
Yeah.
There's one last thing I want to go.
Okay.
I brought the
the sweater.
the sweater. I brought the sweater.
Uh-oh, the geese just became acutely aware of you standing up. Don't worry. They're still pecking at the grass.
All right, so will you show the ring?
Yeah. Let's see if, I guess I just hold it up.
Yeah, I get.
I can't see.
Because we can't see the reflection in there. And so this is the sweater. This is all like this sweater I've had for 20 years. It's filled with holes. And this was the biggest hole right there. And I put that little and people always notice it, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like it's a conversation piece. And then and it fits in perfectly, right? Will line up. There we go.
The ocean of my soul is the key to your heart.
At least you're ready for Hallmark.
I just can't get over that. I mean, can you see that? It's so beautiful. Like, I almost want to pop that rock out and sew it into your sweater.
It would get me another 20 years in it. I've got these holes back here too. Anyway, so that's it. Where are we wrapping up?
Yeah, you had a great wrap up about, I think maybe you've done it already, is that this is not planned.
Okay.
The adventures in the shift, we're now shifting out of this kind of series of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe like it's launching us. It's launching us in a direction. It's
launching us in a direction. I want to continue to do this type of like cataloging of our journeys. And particularly how that, I would like to even start including the people who we go and visit and see if they would sit in on these. Well, or maybe even do like your Know Your Nuts, maybe even become, integrate at least for you, for like who you're interviewing and Know Your Nuts, but then integration of all of the different vehicles. Likewise, the topics which I've discussed, like what I used to do when I would do my presentations, like there's becoming a little bit more formality around that.
Yeah. Like offering them as course.
But offering them as course, but then also having it as like maybe a more thoughtful presentation, and which would then be available that way, I suppose. And then being on the road. Right? And this, did we talk about this in the beginning of this video? Because this is the problem when you do this in 4 different recordings, is like stepping into that aberrus, moving about.
Yes. That's how this video, right?
Right.
Oh, because we've done this in like 4 sections.
And that's how this particular section began, because we showed the arrow.
Oh, but even going back to the very beginning,
okay,
when we were filming what is the start of this potentially really long final piece, is that we got home from Florida and we found out that that the best way forward was to sign another very short-term lease. And we got home from Florida and we had the Wanderer Coming Alive Oracle cards.
Yes.
And you and I just were like, okay, like we want to wrap up Adventures in the Shift and share these magical stories, but also like this wandering or this shifting through adventure, this conscious collapsing of false time, false identities, false narratives, landed us home with like a big invitation from the universe to be like, all right, come wander.
Come wander.
Come wander.
And come wander with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.